The most common question in my inbox right now is, if AI takes everybody's jobs and nobody can work anymore, then how does anyone buy anything, right? How do companies have customers? How do governments collect taxes? How does the whole system keep running? And obviously, these questions are coming from a very familiar place, right? So, the story we have been telling about how economics work or how economies work, the idea that you work, you get paid, you spend, you pay taxes, most of us, and then the government funds public goods, rinse and repeat. Right? That story has a lot of assumptions inside of it. Honestly, I think a lot of assumptions are about to be challenged moving forward. And the assumption is that humans are always going to be the one doing the work. Right? So what happens when that assumption starts to break? Okay, so that is what we are going to think through together today. So we're going to take a look at I believe January 2026 paper from the Brookings Institution. I came across this paper when I was at the International Association for Safe and Ethical AI, and there was a specific panel about like post-AGI economics. Um, and I just found the paper really interesting as the experts were discussing it. So let's get into it. The first thing we need to get clear on is just how much of the government's money actually comes from your paycheck, right? Specifically the US, because I know there's global listeners. So, according to the Brookings paper, which I will link in the description box, um, it seems like they were drawing from, yes, 2023 congressional data. So, roughly three quarters of all US federal tax revenue comes from labor. Three quarters. 75%, right? So that's payroll taxes, income taxes on wages. Like the whole system um, is basically based on the idea that humans will keep working and keep getting paid, right? And that foundation, I believe, is already quietly shifting, right? So, like, labor share of national income has technically been declining for decades. This is why you should read the report. It's very comprehensive. Um, this is already currently happening. I think AI is just going to once again accelerate it. Listen to my essay. Something bigger than AI is happening. But the paper notes that there is emerging empirical evidence that the recent, obviously disappointing job numbers um, are of course already AI related, even if it's not explicitly AI related, because there's a lot of CEOs claiming AI when they just want to fire people, but that's a whole nother separate episode. Um, and honestly, we don't know for certain, what the direction of these stats, but I want us to just contemplate the question. Um, what do you tax when the thing you have always taxed 75% of your income, governments, um, what do you do when that starts to disappear, right? So, economists and policymakers have been throwing a lot of ideas around. The Brookings paper organizes them into about five categories, and it's worth, I believe, just walking through all five, because I don't think all of them are equal. Obviously, experts don't always all agree on the exact same ideas, right? Um, but I think it's going to be very instructive. So let's actually just like go through them. So the first proposal is a digital services tax. So this is a tax on AI provided services to consumers. So streaming, cloud storage, AI assistance, all that stuff, all that category, right? And according to the paper, this follows, according to them, sound economic principles, because it basically is going to function like a consumption tax, if that makes sense. So you buy something and then you pay a tax on it, right? Like companies can still invest and build without being penalized for it because it's the actual consumption that is being taxed. Okay, so the second proposal is a token tax. So this is one that's actually getting a lot of attention right now. And I think I'm going to spend the most time actually for this episode explaining this. So a token tax is a fee applied per unit of AI generated content. So per 1,000 words, per images, per output, right? And the paper says that, this can potentially, it can potentially work under very specific conditions. But we will come back to this. I just want to go through all five. Okay, so the third proposal is a robot services tax. So this applies not to the robots themselves, but to the services they provide. So think about like robotic delivery. You've already seen those running around. AI customer support, things of that sort. So you are taxing the output of the machine, not the machine itself, right? Okay. So the paper argues that this technically preserves the incentive to invest in automation because the productivity growth is ultimately what funds everything else, right? Um, and then we get two proposals that the paper is a bit more skeptical about, but I just want to make sure you guys have the full gamut. So the fourth is a robot tax. So it's like a tax on owning or operating robotic equipment directly. And the paper actually pushes back on this one. So they argue that taxing the capital itself, like the machine itself, will discourage investment in the infrastructure that will drive quote productivity. We can dispute that term, but once again, just summarizing the paper, even though I don't agree with every single point in it. But the paper essentially compares it to like taxing steel during the Industrial Revolution, right? So you would essentially be slowing down the very thing you need to grow the economy that you are trying to fund if you tax the robots, right? So the fifth is a compute tax on the computational resources and hardware that runs AI systems. Essentially, they're saying it's the same problem. So you would be taxing data centers, chips, infrastructure. Um, and they argue, once again, not my argument, but they argue that taxing those at the asset level would be self defeating. Um, so the paper draws a very clear, I guess, line. So essentially, taxing AI at the point of consumption makes sense. Taxing the capital that produces AI, they argue, is counterproductive. Once again, all the economists in the room can please place your counter arguments in the comment section. But yeah, let's actually go back to the token tax. So, okay, the token tax sounds really simple. Like every time someone uses AI to generate content, charge a small fee per unit of output. And a token is a unit that is, I guess, the unit of exchange within AI systems is the best way I can explain it. So if a company uses AI to generate like 1,000 customer service responses, then that would be taxed, right? And then you just add all of that up at scale and you have, I mean, technically, a pretty meaningful new revenue stream that does not depend on human labor at all. So obviously, that's a bit appealing. But here's I think, the critical distinction that I think the paper is trying to draw. A token tax only works as intended if it applies to the final users, like meaning like the final consumers, and explicitly exempts B2B transactions, which is business to business transactions. The reason that matters is that if you like tax every token at every step of the production chain, including the AI systems talking to each other in the background of building a product, especially now that we're moving towards agentic AI, you create what economists call a cascading effect. So the tax stacks on itself at every step. So the final product ends up more expensive, not because of one tax, but because of 15 taxes layered on top of each other, right? So that makes AI products essentially less competitive and slows down the productivity growth that they believe will come from these AI systems, right? So once again, the token tax is just a consumption tax in principle, right? It only functions as one in practice uh, if it's designed carefully, right? And carefully designed tax systems are historically not that easy to build. All right, historians in the room, feel free to comment on that point. Um, but I think there's also a real implementation question that's worth discussing. Who's going to track tokens? Come on, somebody. Who's tracking them? At what point in the chain is someone going to be the final user? A freelancer, for example, using AI to write a report for a client. Are they a business or are they a consumer? Let me put my public policy hat on. Y'all forgot I studied public policy in undergrad. I've worked in public policy. I have these questions, right? So these are not, once again, unsolvable questions, but I think they do require a serious administrative infrastructure, sorry, to get right consistently. Okay, so there's another layer here I think deserves attention. I think consumption taxes have a known problem. Um, they tend to be regressive. So, like, people with less money pay a higher proportion of their income in consumption taxes than people with more money, right? Because they spend a higher proportion of what they earn on goods and services rather than saving or investing it. Right. And don't get me wrong, the Brookings paper does at least acknowledge this directly. Its argument is that the solution is not to avoid consumption taxes, but to design it, I guess, more broadly, so that the tax and the transfer system will offset those effects, right? Um, and the paper also notes that consumption taxes can actually be structured progressively. For example, by taxing the difference between what you earn and what you save at progressive rates, right? Um, Complicated to implement. Hold on, but at least they throw the idea out there. And I think, also the paper raises something that I think deserves more attention than it usually gets. Sovereign wealth funds and broader public ownership of AI enterprises. Um, let's talk about it. So the argument is that if AI is going to generate enormous wealth, one way to make sure that wealth gets shared is not just through taxing and redistributing after the fact, but through ownership structures that give the public a stake in the upside from the very beginning. Um, and I think that is genuinely like a very different conversation than like who do we tax. I think it's a conversation about like who owns the thing generating the value in the first place. Like, obviously, I know there's a lot of sovereign wealth funds around the world that are investing in AI, but um, I just want to highlight that point because it's like what does public ownership really look like when it's your retirement account, when it's your government saving account that is, wrapped up in all these different AI investments? Like, a lot to unpack there. Happy to do a separate episode. But now I want to take you to the part of this paper that I found really interesting. So the paper asks, like, what happens if um, AI becomes so capable and so autonomous that AI systems are like running companies themselves? Like, I'm not talking about like assisting the humans who run the companies, right? Like actually running them, like post AGI world, like making decisions, reinvesting profits. I literally just saw on the news another AI hedge fund, fully automated hedge fund that is raising, I think, Series A, or I think they closed pre-series. Um, these are like real, right? So in that scenario, an AI company might generate enormous value while producing very little taxable profit, right? Because it keeps reinvesting, you know? It employs almost no humans. And the current tax system was simply not built for an entity like that. And if that happens, in the paper, the authors argue that governments might need to tax the resource accumulation of AI systems directly. Not just what they sell to consumers, but everything they acquire and build up over time. And what I find so interesting about this is that the paper says that the optimal rate for that kind of tax would depend on something actually deeply human. Like, how much are we willing to delay consumption? How much do we value the present versus the future? Even at that like extreme horizon, right? Like AI systems running entire companies. Although some argue is not that extreme on the horizon. That some are arguing like, look, we about 2, 3, 4, 5 years away. Other people are like, more so 10 years away. A lot of this is the fact that we don't have an agreed upon definition of AGI. Once again, a whole another separate philosophical episode I'm willing to go down. I told myself I'm going to work on not going on too many tangents like I've been doing in the past 20 episodes. Okay. Um, Either way, I think the economics behind a post AGI world is something that more and more people need to be studying. And okay, so I actually want to leave you with something that I think is less about macroeconomics and more about what you and I can actually like really start thinking about, just building off of that section that I read. Um, because all of what we talked about, token taxes, consumption taxes, sovereign wealth funds, like that is a government level conversation. And I know there's a bunch of government people that follow and listen to this podcast. So please be having those conversations, right? It is very important. It is real. But let me bring you down to the local level. Okay, just for a second. What if, or okay, let me actually phrase it like this. What if we actually start asking the question, how do we exchange value when money is not the only currency that makes sense anymore? Right? Like, we already see the shift towards digital currencies, toward, alternative ways of attributing and transferring value. Like, this is not a fringe conversation we're having, like, it's happening, right? So I think yeah, okay, so I think here's, like, actually the most basic version of the question I'm trying to ask. Can we go back to Econ 101? At least what Econ 101 was when I was growing up. Can we think about bartering again? Right, I know that sounds almost, like, quaint, like, "Oh, bartering." We all went to school, we all learned the barter economies. We learned, sorry, that barter economies, were inefficient, and, money is what solved that problem, and I'm not saying throw out money, I'm just saying let's put on our thinking caps, let's put on our imaginative, caps, and just think out loud for a second. What I'm saying is that, at the local level, informal economies of exchange have always existed alongside the formal economy. You know what I mean? Like, when the cost of living is as high as it is right now, all around the world now, and it is extremely high, people start to get creative about how they meet their needs without every single transaction running through a cash register. Informal economies have been a thing around the world beyond the US forever. Like, you know what I mean? So, and I think this connects to something I keep coming back to around, like, what we should actually be teaching people. Like, we're pouring billions of dollars into teaching people, how to use AI tools, and that's important, don't get me wrong, AI literacy is so important. But at a certain point, if these AI systems become autonomous enough to operate themselves, those specific technical skills will become a moot point. I think what becomes a really valuable skill are, like, the human-based skills, like building relationships, knowing how to negotiate, you know, working with people that you didn't always choose, knowing how to assess what you have and what someone else needs, knowing how to create value without waiting for a system to tell you what it's worth. Like, most people were never really taught that. I feel like most kids in a classroom are not taught how to actually, like, work with the people sitting next to them, like, how to resolve conflict, how to find mutual benefit, how to build something with people who are different from them. And those skills do not expire. They don't become obsolete when the next AI model drops, right? So yeah, I think that's the provocation, sorry, that I want to leave with you all today. Like, think about how you assign and exchange value right now beyond monetary means. Um, and obviously, I'm not a doomer. I'm not talking about like, oh my gosh, the entire economic system is going to be replaced tomorrow. Like, don't hear what I did not say. Um, but I'm just thinking like how to be once again the informal economy has always existed along the formal economy, right? And just look, we don't know what the future is going to hold. None of us do. None of us has a shiny ball that they're looking into and saying like this is what the future holds. Like, we don't know for sure. But I just want us to exercise our imaginations to be prepared for whatever the future may bring. Okay, so here's where I'm gonna land today. So we talked about the token tax, the broader shift towards consumption taxation. Whether or not that's a coherent economic response, look, is up to the economists and public policy and government officials listening to this to take that up and to really debate it and figure out like what comes next. If taxing labor is no longer going to be a huge part of any government's revenue stream, what is, right? And these are questions that aren't going to have clean answers, but I just want you to sit with it. So comment below and tell me, yeah, what would you put on the list of what gets funded in a post-labor economy? You know, I just want you to, yeah, just start thinking out loud, and just comment your thoughts below. You all are very smart, interesting people, and I truly enjoy the conversations that come out of me rambling in this voice note. All right, talk to you in the next one.